Welcome to Brands on Tap, the podcast where we discuss all things brand related.
So whether you're a business owner, industry expert, or simply interested, this podcast is for you. Welcome back to the Brands on Tap podcast where we talk all things branding and marketing. And this week we're talking about measurement and reporting and how important that is to us as marketers. So I'm going to hand over to Josh. She's going to give a bit of an overview, top level of all things measurement and why it's so important to us when we're implementing campaigns, everything. So
I think a good place to start is probably why it's important, because I think brands often miss how crucial it is to get the measurement right.
It's easy to skip over, I think, if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, so I think crucially, a lot of brands need that business plan, firstly, which I know we've already touched on in our first episode, but without having that roadmap of where you want to be, whether that's in 6 months, a year, 5 years, it's just really hard as an agency and as industry experts to recommend what you need to achieve and also what measurement you need to put in place. So I think making sure that you're aware, whether you're a business owner or working in the industry, that you need to have KPIs in place, which I think is a good place for us to start in terms of what are KPIs.
I mean, I think so many businesses, local authorities don't know what they are. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that when they're coming to us and we're almost working a bit blind because we don't know what they're trying to achieve or what is actually achievable in that industry, because we're not industry experts. We can try and learn, but at the end of the day, they know their industry and what that kind of the climate is like in a way and how many inquiries, etc. they're likely to get. Yeah. So I mean, KPIs stands for... Yeah. Is it key performance indicator?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, this is where we've spoken about it, and obviously different industries have different meanings for KPIs, which makes things a little bit confusing for business owners, I think.
Yeah. I feel like I've always thought it was something else. That's why I get confused. But yeah.
Yeah, KPIs. So key performance indicators, obviously they're going to vary very much depending on the industry. So whether you're e-commerce, whether you're doing a recruitment campaign, awareness, whatever that is, they're all going to be specific to you. So I mean, if it is e-commerce, it could be that you want to achieve X amount sales percentage increase year on year or within 6 months, say.
Yeah, it's that time frame as well, isn't it, and how quickly you can achieve those.
Yeah, and I think once they've been determined and what you think is realistic, that's kind of when you can hand those to an agency and say, how can we achieve that? And that's kind of up to us to advise on that. So once those KPIs are in place, that's obviously where we need to measure how successful they are. So
that's where all the fun stuff comes in.
So metrics.
There's so many different ones, and I don't think I realised coming into the industry how many things you can look at and how many variants as well of one thing, the cost per click, conversion, everything, it's a lot, I think, and for someone who isn't familiar with it to try and take on is quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably if we're looking at most important metrics, obviously that's going to vary depending on your KPIs, but overall I'd say cost per click.
Yeah, in paid,
paid and cost per conversion ultimately, because whether that's a sale, a form submit, a call, you want to know how much your activity is quantifying in terms of that result and what the cost is ultimately. And then from that you can work out what your spends need to be month on month, whether you need to increase, decrease, change your creatives, change your strategy, whether that's targeting, the actual creative itself, the imagery, the headlines. And I think that's something we're obviously always doing.
Always changing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I just think it's such a realm of complexity, because like I say, so many different things to consider. And then when you've set your KPIs, you also need to still keep on track of what your cost per click is, even though that's not even something you probably outlined, because they're really normally quite top level. But actually, you need to make sure that your investment isn't going to things that aren't necessarily helping you. But that's kind of a separate thing, I guess. But I mean, I feel like as marketers it'd be useful to say what we tend to look over or analyse per campaign, because I feel like there's a few main ones, but then I feel like we differ as well, because some things you look at more than I look at, bounce rates. I know you mentioned a lot, but I don't. That's not always something that comes to mind when I first look, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think people often skip over bounce rates, and I think that's a really important one because you could be seeing great traffic levels from a Facebook ad campaign, but then you think, great, I've got like 1,000+ clicks, in the past week or month, but actually when you look at the quality of those, it's like, it could be a 60% bounce rate, and obviously bounce rates per industry are going to change in terms of what like benchmarks are, and you can easily access those on like different multiple sources online. But yeah, I think looking at bounce rates really important because you need to understand, okay, we're driving all this traffic, but is it actually
relevant to us?
And engagement on site, which especially with spam traffic, you can get a lot of that with Facebook and social media.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the intention as well. Like if you're running a Google ad for search terms that aren't necessarily driving traffic to your site that is specific to your service, people are clicking on your site thinking, actually, no, this isn't what I want, and clicking straight off. And then you have to think, are you wasting that budget? Because great that it's got you X amount of clicks, but if they're not relevant and it's not doing anything for you, yeah, it's quite a big factor really that I think a lot of people skip over. And like I say, I've probably not always looked at that as one of the first things I measure.
What would you look at?
I definitely look at the number of clicks first, then conversions, obviously. I think that's, most people do that. And then the cost per click, cost per conversion, and then, I don't know after that. Like the number of impressions, reach. I guess number of impressions, if it's like Google, I tend to look quite a lot at that and what variant gets the most. Because obviously we do a lot of like split testing, like age-wise, like to split the demographics. So I always like to see which demographic has created the most impressions for that ad. Or like within that same, because often it's the same budget initially.
Yeah, agreed.
I think we do that quite often now, don't we? Like with a lot of clients, it's like the split testing. Because that is a good element though, I guess, to start with. If they're not completely sure of the industry, or we're not sure of the industry, it's great to know kind of what age it is that are actually attributing the most conversions, clicks, etc.
Agreed. I think the biggest thing I would say is look at all metrics, because like you say, it's easy to skip over some that you're not focusing on. And like even with a specific campaign, if it is say an awareness campaign, you're most likely going to be looking at your reach and your impression rates more so than other perhaps like cost per click, cost per conversion. But if you want to get like a really comprehensive view of how successful something is, you really do need to utilize all available metrics, whether that's in Meta, GA4, any analytics system you're using, to make the most informed decisions on what is and what isn't performing well.
And as well, I guess, so like you can have different results based on what tracking metrics or tracking systems you use. Because obviously GA4, everything is GA4 now. But then also we're exploring like plausible for different clients as well, which has given us different results, but it's a different way of tracking. So, and I feel like a lot of people probably won't be familiar with what that is. I mean, you can, because that is way over my head, I think, at the minute still.
Yeah, so GA4 is purely based on it's an events-based tracking, so it's all focused on third-party cookies and your cookie acceptance in order to determine the analytics that comes through. And it's a bit of a grey area really, because obviously if people are in incognito rejecting
and I'm so guilty now of going to incognito because I know I don't know,
there's that awareness that like people just don't, they're more familiar with the fact that they don't want to be like tracked online.
It's like when you're like we've said it before, like when you're trying to book a holiday, or like you don't want them to, when you go back on the site, the cost miraculously has gone up.
Absolutely.
So then you've got that urgency, don't you? But then it's like yeah,
no, I think there's people are more aware that they don't want to be tracked. They don't want to have their data necessarily as available as it is. And I think that's where like systems that aren't based on cookies, like Plausible, which focuses on IP data, are more appealing, and also giving a more potentially accurate view of what is happening on your site in terms of activity. Obviously the two are going to be very different if you're comparing like GA4 and Plausible, because ultimately they are comparing fundamentally different things in terms of quantifying users, page views, all the metrics that you'll see. But having two data sources is really valuable. But also being conscious of the fact that Google's meant to be phasing out third-party cookies in quarter 3 of this year. So
Yeah, which I wonder how that will change things for us, because I guess it's the unknown at the minute, isn't it, really?
yeah, and I think they've just released minimal information. So until that actually comes, it's kind of classic Google not giving much insight into what those changes are going to be. It's kind of like when Universal Analytics moved over
I
to
missed
GA4.
because I was still like at uni then. I didn't have to deal with all of that. You did that before I joined, so
It's like they hardly release like any information, so it's kind of like up to us to decipher all of that. But I think it's definitely got its advantages in terms of like event-based tracking, and it's got much greater analytics in terms of like engagement rates and just general event counts on site. So it's got more flexibility in terms of you can set up event-based tracking in GA4, but as we know, we tend to do it in Google Tag Manager, which might be worth us talking about.
Yeah, I mean, since learning all of it, I feel like I've done it mostly in Tag Manager. I can't think of anything we've really done in GA4 except when it's tracking button text rather than like your cook class or etc.
Yeah, but one thing, because I feel like I've definitely tested the two in terms of setting up events directly in GA4 versus Tag Manager, and I just find, for me personally, the accuracy in Tag Manager is greater, and I don't know if that's just simply in the way that GA4 is quantifying those metrics versus, Google Tag Manager most likely. But I think it's like a solid way of doing that. But yeah, how would you summarise Google Tag Manager?
So you can track anything if you wanted to, but you have to individually set everything up. That's from a bit of a layman's point of view. Like I could track a button and see how many clicks I've got on it, but there's no saying that 100% that person went onto that page and did the action that you want them to do. Like if it's or you could track a form submit and that track that someone successfully submitted a form, but you don't know that through a button click. No. So you could be tracking it and it could tell you, oh yeah, this person submitted a form, but actually they might not have, it might not have successfully gone through. Yes, they clicked the button, but they might not have entered all the fields, etc. So, but there are ways around it, which I've come to learn, I think, because initially I thought, oh God, it's a bit of like a unknown. And I think still, depending on your website and your campaign, there are still going to be unknowns sometimes, but there are ways around them. It's just the time to implement those changes. Like we've put like thank you pages on.
Yeah, they're really good for that.
Yeah, and at least then you know that the traffic on that thank you page is only there because they've submitted successfully. So you can actually categorically count those figures. And then kind of the same, I guess, applies. I guess it's the same in plausible.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think.
But then in plausible, you have to enter the code into the back end of the site, don't you?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you're specifically applying that custom code to buttons, whereas in J4, I think that is definitely one perk of it over plausible, is that you can get much more granular insight, albeit that you're not necessarily getting the most accurate view in terms of total traffic, but for the traffic you are getting, you can be much more specific in what you want to measure. So with Google Tag Manager, when we're looking at, say, forms, we can then put in form IDs. So we're looking at certain forms on certain pages. We can track the specific fields that people are completing and then pair that with thank you pages, like you say, so we can see exactly how much has come from that specific form and measure that to the source, whether that's organic, direct, referral, and so on.
Which brings us on to UTMs, which I feel like I don't want to skip over the whole tracking thing because it is so difficult. But we could do a million episodes on that on its own because there's so many ins and outs and there's so much to kind of go into that it's almost impossible to go into everything. And the thing is as well, sorry, just going back to GA4, if you're tracking something in Google Tag Manager though, am I right in thinking if they decline cookies, you can't track their actions regardless of what you're tracking in terms of button clicks, form submissions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So then it kind of renders that. And people are, like we said, like getting more aware of sharing their data. I know obviously it's anonymous, but then I didn't think that before I started working in it. Yeah. Like I used to just think, oh, I'm rejecting that because I don't want them to see what I'm doing. But actually they don't know any ins and outs. They know what you've done, but they don't know who you are as much as some people might think they do. Yeah, but, absolutely. Yeah.
Going back to UTMs. No, but do you want to summarise UTMs?
UTMs are code you can add to the end of your target URL or domain to then pull in I don't even know how to explain it, because so then it pulls in the data of how, basically, if you click on someone's post link in their Facebook post, they could have added a UTM that says, oh, this came from this specific ad in Facebook.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yes.
in layman's terms.
Yeah, so you've got like your source, you've got your medium, which are typically the most used, and then you've got other fields as well, like your campaign ID if you want to put that in. So I think the key thing with UTMs is you want to be quite specific in how you do it in a methodical way, because people just chuck whatever they want in there and then
Forget what they put in there, so that it means nothing.
and then they'll go to GA4, and then it's really difficult for them to like ascertain that data, because you basically say if you want to see about page views and then filter it in GA4, then you're kind of filtering by, say, source, medium or campaign ID, and then you're kind of forgetting, or there's no consistency in terms of the metrics you're putting in. So if you're running like quite a large campaign and you haven't got that, it's quite easy to then get confused by the stats. So I think having like a methodical way in which you put the source, mediums, campaign ID, etc. into that UTM makes it a lot easier for you in the long run to measure how successful your campaign is.
Yeah, definitely. I do, because I think for a while I didn't realise that, because Google only pulls one element in, doesn't it? I can't remember which one it is.
Oh no, several.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think on the report I had one pulled in.
Okay.
And I didn't realise that, because I would put like medium Google, but now I put like, I can't remember if it's the medium or not though. I'll have to check this.
Yeah.
I pull one in like, and I'd put like Google, but now I'd put like Google and then the age range if we're split testing. Do you know what I mean? As one section, just so it all pulls in together.
I see. Yeah, I've got a tendency to do that when it's like a campaign ID.
Yeah.
I'll put something, so because obviously when you're in GA4, for people that don't know this, you can select to filter by the campaign, and sometimes if you don't put something that is like in terms of split testing, like if it's your testing, I guess like you said, age demographics, and then you're not feeding that into your UTM, it's just going to make your life harder by trying to then filter between source, medium, campaign.
And then you have to compare the two, and it's, yeah,
so I do that as well. I put like say if we were doing age split testing, I'll just put like the age and then some word that I know aligns with that campaign.
Write them down now, because
Oh,
I think so many people don't like, and like sometimes some client, if it depends on the like client, but when it's been like local authority, sometimes they've given us them, and actually that's really useful because we know that it lines up then, because obviously if it's their website and we're just running a campaign on behalf of them, at least they know what UTMs we've got, and they know what results they're pulling in off the back of our campaign.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't always have full transparency on someone's website, or we don't have full visibility, not transparency.
Yeah. And I think as well, sometimes clients, if you're like working collaboratively with someone in-house, they'll go and do their own UTM method naturally, and then we'll do ours. So we need to just try and create some consistency there. So I think just like having that conversation to determine how you're actually measuring your UTMs is really useful as well.
Agreed.
So I feel like we've talked about UTMs quite a bit, but what we haven't touched on is the offline side of marketing and how you can like effectively measure that
With UTMs.
So print wise, what would you suggest if you're doing like any print campaigns?
So obviously you can add a UTM to any website link, but it's visible and no one is going to type in a really long link. So that's kind of where QR codes come in. And I love a QR code. If I see a QR code, I'm scanning it. Like, not on like things that I'm not interested in, but if it's on a leaflet or something that I'm actually like, or when you go to a like Weatherspoons, or you go to like a restaurant and it's like scan to pay or scan to order, I'm not going to go to the website. I'm just going to scan the QR code. Yeah,
I think it's definitely simpler.
And like, and then that is when the UTM will kick in. So they will know how many people have scanned that specific QR code per, like, I don't even know. So I guess per collateral. So you can change the UTM on any collateral, because you could have a different one per variant if you wanted, or per design. Because, I mean, you could track leaflets, you could track, like scan to whatever. You could track it on business cards, literally anything, like billboards, TV. Because, like, you've done QR codes on TV before, haven't you?
Oh, I think we have. Yeah.
I think so. I can think of one.
Yeah. As long as you can, that's fine. Yeah, I think we must have. I feel like sometimes clients even suggest doing a QR code on a social media ad, which I think for us is an absolute no, because ultimately when you've got a paid digital ad, you've already got the link to it, so there's no need to put the QR code. So I think
That's
put it on your print.
it's a red flag, isn't it? You don't want to do that.
No.
There's no need. Like, you can't physically, when you're on your phone, you can't physically do anything to make it go through the QR codes. There's just no point, kind of thing. But then I guess sometimes people reuse collateral on different platforms. That's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, I think like just with what you said about long URLs though as well with print, obviously you can always do redirects as well, which are useful. So if you do want to have like a shortened URL, especially if you've got even like a really long domain name anyway, like you could just set up a new one in addition to, and have that as like a redirect to a specific page, or simplify it in some way. So that's a good way to do that if you don't want to use QR codes, and then you can still apply the UTM to that. Even if it's not on a QR code. But I think people are pretty familiar with them now, and I think as long as you've got like a good incentive on the print collateral to get people to
to actually go through,
jobs are good, and really
clear call to actions, CTAs, as we like to call them. But then I think that obviously there are some offline marketing channels where it is really hard to track where they've come from. Like, I guess unless you do a redirect, but like on radio, you say go to www. Like, you don't have the opportunity, because you just direct them to probably your homepage, rather than, or sometimes they will say / and then like the page specific. But how often do people actually do that?
I think the simpler the better. I feel like if you're going to do that, you need it to be super simple, memorable. I mean, something we have done quite a lot is text codes. I feel like their popularity has really gone down, but
like bus back, text codes are like a good option. Same with radio. I'm trying to think where else. TV, people use them a lot. I always see them on like charity TV ads, like, you know, your sort of daytime TV ones.
Yeah, I think they're still pretty good. I think sometimes there's like a value add in obviously looking at things that generally aren't being done as much as well. It's like, I think things have gone so digital that you can kind of forget print and offline activity and text codes, and actually it might be worth exploring, because that is a way you can effectively measure as well, text codes, because if you set one up you can see how many texts you've received and quantify it that way, so that's quite useful as well.
Yeah, and like often when you have a text code, you have like a bounce back text, don't you? So if I texted the text code, I'd get a text back that says, right, here's what to do next, visit this website, and you can UTM that.
Absolutely. So you
can add UTMs to most things, I guess.
Some people even do like a separate phone line, which, you know, I feel like doesn't get done as often either, but still a good way.
The day of like phoning and texting is kind of like filtering out, isn't it? But then saying that, some people do just prefer to like phone quick, like, because I'm like the email. You're probably you a lot of the time would rather phone someone.
I'm a phoner.
Yeah, you are a phoner.
I think so.
But then
to get that answer.
Whereas I'm a put it in an email. I'll ring, then I'll put it in an email, then I'll ring again, and then hope for the best.
Hope they reply to that email.
No, literally. But because kind of going back to what you were just saying with like print, I do think there has to be print, but in addition to social and all your online efforts.
Oh, for sure.
We've said it 100 times. There's no use having a really lovely website and everything print wise, and then having no presence on social media, because we're now the generation like where I will see a brand and I'll think, okay, what's their Instagram following, or what have they posted, when did they last post on Instagram? And if I'm seeing that it's like a random date in 2022, I'm probably thinking, do you know what I mean?
No, for sure.
I don't know if that's an age thing or just a, don't know.
I feel like we can definitely talk about like social media as being a search engine, but maybe that's for another episode.
Because I feel like, again, that, but like even conversations we've had in the office, that's a age thing, I think, as well.
Oh, for sure.
I 100% think it is, but I know loads of people don't think it is. But then they're not using it as one, is what I'd say. It's just their use is different.
That's true.
But that's a whole other.
Yeah, we can get onto that another time. But I think we've kind of covered it quite well with print. I don't think there's anything else really that we can.
No, I mean, we could do a whole episode on print. But it's completely separate. But I mean, the kind of like last thing in terms of like tracking and having maximum visibility would be landing pages per campaign, which is something that we do quite often.
Oh, for sure. I think if you want to make the most out of your campaign and all traffic that you're driving to a specific place, you need a landing page. You know, it's...
What is a landing page? I feel like we should say.
Good question. It's a custom, I would say, a custom bespoke
page on your website.
Yeah. But they,
in addition to standalone and in addition to what you've already got.
Yeah, and only accessible via the campaign that you're driving traffic to.
So you can't navigate to it through the website.
Yeah, that's normally the case. And it's built with conversion in mind because, in essence, everything on that page needs to nurture the traffic that you're driving there to get them to convert, whether that's a form, phone call, whatever it might be. So, we always recommend landing pages to any campaign that we're working on. And again, from a tracking point of view, like you can see exactly how much traffic and conversions you've attributed. It's just a much clearer cut way of tracking, especially with specific campaigns, how successful they are.
And it's not targeting everyone, because that's the thing with your website. Your website has to think of every stage of marketing funnel, what stage everyone's at in terms of converting, whereas a landing page is realistically, like it's a fresh campaign, you know that they're at the initial stages, and you know the tone of voice is going to be slightly different because of how you're targeting, etc. So you can really like nurture down on, or like target down on that age group, their different ACON data, everything like that. So they're definitely a value add.
Yeah, and even like split testing landing pages, because that's another great way of, it's all well and good, maximizing your funnel, whatever digital marketing or whatever marketing you're doing, but you ultimately need to make sure that's reflected on the landing page, because there's no good driving all this quality traffic to a site and a page that doesn't convert properly. So that's where you can introduce new creatives, have separate landing pages, and see how successful they are. Because especially in the messaging, it needs to mirror, what campaign you're promoting. It needs to be geared to that. And sometimes it may be that actually testing a few different variants of that's really successful for you.
I think, I mean, in addition, obviously, to landing pages is SEO, but I feel like we can kind of cover that completely separately. I mean, you could listen to a whole podcast that's specifically about SEO. There's so many things to cover.
We can do that in another episode, because I think the measurement of that's so different to like any other. I mean, I think if we were just to cover the very basics, obviously with any like SEO, for anyone that doesn't know, I guess it's search engine optimization, which is the process of optimizing your website.
You've done well there, saving that. I would have just thrown SEO out there and not given any explanation.
So it's like making sure that your website is optimized effectively for search results, with the view that you're going to rank as high as possible to get the maximum quality traffic to your site.
Relevant quality traffic.
And obviously you're looking at keywords, you're looking at your domain authority, all of which, your traffic levels, keyword performance specifically in their positions. There's so much, but I think we can go into SEO separately another time. But if we're gonna, maybe we should just round up our key recommendations of today.
UTMs, urchin tracking module. So there's endless possibilities with UTMs. You can add them to literally every channel you use. It's free. You might as well do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's there. You might as well know what traffic you've got coming from what channel, and then you'll have more of an idea of what relevant traffic, or even then you can tell what behaviours they have on site just from that one channel. So you know the quality of them as well. So that would be probably my top one.
Yeah, I think for me, GA4, making sure it's set up correctly. There's nothing worse than setting up conversions, events, and they don't work.
Yeah, so that's kind of a thing in itself. And checking them.
Test them before you go live with a campaign. Make sure they're firing correctly. Go into your testing mode in Google Tag Manager.
Make sure you submit it after though. Because people do that a lot, don't they? And it'll say 10 workplace changes, but they won't have pressed submit.
So then you're thinking you set something up
and it won't do anything.
So making sure you've got all your metrics and events, conversions set up from the very start of your campaign for full visibility of performance. That would be top for me.
I I can't think what else. Landing pages.
Landing
Pages, every campaign, because you can completely tailor what you say to that one specific audience.
Yeah, split testing. Always do that if you want to make sure you're maximising your performance and not just stagnating across, the set parameters that you've...
Yeah, because you don't know what age demographic is going to engage best with that type of collateral. You don't know what type of collateral people are going to engage with best, whether it's video, static, carousel, etc. So, yeah, I think that's a top.
Yeah, I think having just multiple sources of analytics as well. So whether that's plausible in GA4 or another system, in addition to GA4 that is not based on cookies, I think...
Well, that's the way it's going, isn't it?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, multiple sources, more insight.
Yeah, there'll be updates on that soon, hopefully,
Yeah.
for us. But we'll see, yeah.
I think that's it.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining this episode. And yeah, sure we'll be back very soon.